What is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts Dylan and Ryan. And today we're going to talk about a trade target that has started to emerge in recent days, Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, a big reason why this target has emerged is because the Grizzlies just traded Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic yesterday. So now it seems like that there's kind of some rumors going around about Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, and some of those other guys on the Memphis Grizzlies. As we all know, too, the Knicks are heavily interested in Taylor Jenkins as head coach. Right now he doesn't have a job, but the last team that he was with was the Memphis Grizzlies. So there's a bit of connections there, a lot of ties there. We're going to talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. though, and what we think he might be to the Knicks if the Knicks were to trade for him and all that kind of stuff. So Ryan, first off, tell me how you're doing, and secondly, when you hear about the Jaren Jackson rumors going around, what is your first reaction to that, and do you think he would be a good fit on the Knicks?
So I personally love the fit of Jaren Jackson Jr. with the New York Knicks, and I know that there are concerns here, and I'm going to address them first and foremost because it's totally fair to talk about them. You have the rebounding and the fouls, the lack of rebounding for a big man, and the propensity to foul out and the propensity to rack up fouls, which does affect your ability to win games. But I think you take those two flaws and you run with them. It does not outweigh what he brings to the table. Number one, and first and foremost, as a defensive player, Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of the best defensive players in the NBA. I know the block numbers have come down a little bit over the last few years, but he is still a premium defender in terms of impact. He does an excellent job on that side of the ball. And when you look about what the New York Knicks need in order to win an NBA championship with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, they need defense. Defense, 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 and defense. When you look at Jaren Jackson Jr.'s defensive numbers, he's in the 95th percentile in rim protection, in the 70th percentile in rim deterrence. So he isn't elite at deterring shots at the rim, but when he does get those shots at the rim, he's elite at not allowing them to convert into points, which is a huge win. That's exactly what you need, because if you look at what Karl Anthony Towns lacks, it's that rim protection. And then you look at his numbers with the Memphis Grizzlies this season. Now, the Memphis Grizzlies were kind of a disaster this year. They had a late season collapse, but despite that, he was still in the 93rd percentile in defensive EPM, so he is one of the best defenders in the NBA. If you look at the New York Knicks roster this year, they had no one grade out above a 90th percentile in defensive EPM, so right then and there, you're talking about what would be your best defensive player. And look, I fundamentally understand the previous flaws I just mentioned, but the big perk here that you're getting is he's someone who shot 37.5% from three on 5.3 attempts per game. In his career, he's a 35% three-point shooter on 4.9 attempts per game, which, when weighed with the defensive value he brings to the table, makes him an overall very valuable player. He is capable of putting the ball on the floor and scoring if needed. He is capable of being a productive offensive player. And the last thing I'd like to reference here that I think is extremely valuable when we talk about the New York Knicks being an offensive juggernaut and being productive on the offensive side of the ball, he shot 40% from three-point range on corner threes. That's super encouraging. So he's someone who you can have in the corner, and if you need him to hit a big shot, he can. Those are plays that the Knicks needed more of in the postseason. Not that they weren't capable of creating them, but when they did, it did not convert into scoring. I know that this would require you to trade one of your wings in Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. Now, Bridges is the one that makes the most sense from a salary fit, and the report from Clutch Sports was that the Grizzlies have displayed interest in Mikal Bridges in the past, offering up to 4 first-round picks for him at one point. But look, as much as I think those two players are productive NBA players and that trading them should not be a must in order to win, I would gladly, I think it's not close. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is a better player than either of those two guys. Maybe not as much OG Anunoby. Maybe not, the gap there isn't massive. But I think he's definitely better than Mikal Bridges, and I like Mikal Bridges, but I don't think that one's close. And then again, you start thinking about the fit, right? Even if you want to talk about the rebounding flaw, Josh Hart is a well above average rebounder for the position, and Karl Anthony Towns still rebounds well. Dylan, with all of the positives and the negatives that come with bringing in Jaren Jackson Jr., where do you stand on this side of the debate?
Yeah, I'm a little indifferent, and I think the reason why I am is because, the foul troubles and the lack of rebounding. I do think he is a premier defensive player, and of course, a very good floor spacer at the five. He has improved his scoring numbers over the years. I mean, he just came off a season where he averaged 22.2 points per game, which was the second highest in his career, with the highest being the season before, where it was 22.5, so barely even a difference right there. He's always been a reliable shooter, always been a reliable all-around scorer, good defender, as we mentioned. He averaged 1.5 blocks per game this past year and 1.2 steals. So that's almost three stocks per game if you want to go by that metric. But the things that I'm worried about with JJJ, it's like this. I feel like he could be a really good fit next to Cat just because of the defense. I really do. But the fouls, it worries me a lot, because what was one of the big reasons we were giving Cat a lot of crap, at the five? Because of the fouls, the undisciplined fouls. He's been in the league now. Cat's been in the league for like 10 years. That's never going to change. He's always going to have those foul problems. It's going to be consistent. JJJ has just finished his 7th year in the league, so he's also someone who's been around long enough to where you kind of know who he is at this point. And we know he always gets into foul trouble. Always. And the rebounding and the fouls were hurting the Memphis Grizzlies throughout the season, into the playoffs, and all that stuff. It was a big reason why they've had some problems. Now, I'm not saying he's like a net negative, because he's obviously arguably their best player, but at the same time, you bring him on to the Knicks, and let's say he and Cat are both in foul trouble. Who's playing Who's playing the five? Who's even playing the four? They're already a bit of an undersized team as it is, so you lose one of those guys, nevertheless, both of them, in many games, that's going to be a problem. You know what I mean? I mean, Cat getting into foul trouble throughout the playoffs was a huge problem. I mean, a huge problem. There is one thing if or if you're missing like one of your backup guards or something like that, or even your starting shooting guard, if he gets into foul trouble, Karl-Anthony Towns has a lot of responsibility on the Knicks. He is responsible for a large portion of the scoring load, and they were asking him for most of the year to anchor the paint. And he was getting into foul trouble constantly. It was like a regular for him. Constantly hitting 3 fouls early in the second quarter, so he's got to sit that entire quarter. Hitting the 5 foul mark late in the third quarter, so he's got to sit for half of the fourth quarter. That's not ideal. You know what I mean? It was never really ideal, and I worry the same thing with Jaren Jackson Jr. It sounds like such a silly thing to point at, because it's like, oh, well, just be better, more disciplined. You won't get called for fouls. But, JJJ, I'm looking at the numbers here. He's averaged over 3.5 fouls per game for his career. So fouling is like a regular thing for him. And in fact, in 2019, he averaged 4 fouls per game. 4 personal fouls. So he was always in foul trouble. It was like routine for him to be in foul trouble. Now, I understand most big men are going to get into foul trouble because they're the ones that are being attacked the most in the paint, right? But at the same time, I want my guys to be out there on the floor. I do. And as much as I think Jaren Jackson Jr. could be a good fit because of the offense he brings, the rim protection, all that stuff, the fouls, man, the fouls. If you can't be on the court, what is the point? You know what I mean? I don't want to trade a bunch of guys who, actually do stay on the court for a guy who, while could be a great fit, is never on the court because he's getting into foul trouble. You know what I mean? I will say, too, though, JJJ has been, since 2021, he's been pretty healthy. He's played at least 60 games ever since 2021 in each season. So, I can give the durability aspect for that. That's always a plus. But at the same time, I just, if he's not going to be on the court because of foul trouble, that irks me more than injuries. Because sometimes injuries you can't always control. You can control getting into foul trouble, though. And JJJ has always been someone that does. So that worries me a little bit. But what I will say, on the good side of the whole thing, I do think that if there was a big man to go after, in the trade market or free agency, and you really badly needed, an upgrade at the starting 5, I would look at JJJ. I'm not going to say that I wouldn't trade for JJJ 100%. No, I'm open to it. I'm definitely open to it, because I do think he can provide an impact to where, he can make the Knicks better. I just worry about if the Knicks can actually take that next leap with him, because of how much you'd have to give up, and because of the other, foul trouble concerns that I brought up. I think that is definitely a valid concern to have. I think, it's as minor as it may sound, it's reasonable in my opinion, just because of, the type of issues that fouls give us. We've just watched Karl-Anthony Towns get into foul trouble all the time. Now, I will say you do want to have Cat paired next to a rim protecting big. You could easily just have Mitchell Robinson start in the starting five. I think you can definitely do that and get those guys some synergy. But of course, JJJ brings the floor spacing that Mitchell Robinson does not. So I do see both sides of this, and that's why I say I'm indifferent. Because I think that in one hand, it can be a very good move to go after him. But on another hand, I can see why people would be highly against it because of like the foul trouble and all that kind of stuff. So that's really where I stand on it. It's like I really don't know how I feel just yet about it. I will say though too, before I pass it back to you, I think it's highly unlikely that they even get Jaren Jackson Jr., but it's still worth talking about just because of the rumors that we've been hearing and all that kind of stuff. And plus, you never know with Leon Rose anymore. Anytime the Knicks have a supposed target, it seems like Leon Rose always finds a way to get that target, whether it's right away or eventually down the road. So we can't even rule anything out at this point. But if you ask me, I don't think they're going to end up with JJJ. I would definitely not be upset if they did, depending on the price, of course, depending on the return package. But, those concerns I laid out, that's really how I feel about it. I want to get your thoughts on that, though.
Yeah, so look, my first thought here is when it comes to the likelihood, I don't think it's high, but I think it's higher. I think it's higher than maybe you're giving it credit for, only because I do think that when the Knicks have a guy they like, and when there's a lot of reports like they like this guy, they've liked this guy for years, they're gonna at least explore it. There's no shot that they're not gonna explore this, and I also wonder, if you're Memphis, do you believe that the Jaren Jackson and John Morant thing is working out the way you want it to? You won 48 games last year. Maybe it's time for a little bit of a shakeup, having some more draft picks as well. Maybe that helps them acquire other players or kind of retool, reconfigure this roster. It's not like the Memphis Grizzlies are this team that they're right on the precipice of contention. I don't view that as that team. And I also think that when we look at the Knicks' kind of history with trades, a lot of these trades are more of these shocking ones. I did not know what the probability of Mikal Bridges getting traded to the New York Knicks when, like, the day of, I did not think was above 50%, and the probability of them trading for Karl-Anthony Towns the day of, which that came at night, so I'm saying when I woke up that day, I did not think was also above 50%. They have this tendency to make very stunning deals, so I do wonder if maybe that this is another example of that. I also, you kind of have to wonder with their current roster, they just traded away their top wing. Their number one wing guy. Desmond Bane was their number one wing, their most reliable. They just traded him away. Does a John Morant team work without a wing? And the way that teams in the NBA seem to value wings, it does make me wonder if they would at least entertain it. Not to say that the Memphis Grizzlies are dying to get rid of Jaren Jackson Jr., but rather that I think the Knicks have something that, again, can serve as an advantage here, as it was talked about in that Clutch Points article. Now, I did want to also float this, because you are not going to just have a Mikal Bridges for a Jaren Jackson swap. You need to add some pick compensation. The Knicks do not have a ton of that to offer up. I kind of pondered with the idea of, hey, do you want to kind of do what the Magic did in a sense, or I guess what the Grizzlies did with the Magic, and KCP was a way for Memphis to get more draft capital out of this because KCP is a net negative asset. I wonder if maybe KCP is someone you could reroute to New York and figure out the salary situation for that, because I number one, when it comes to like Mitchell Robinson, I love Mitchell Robinson, but I also don't think the Knicks are going to extend him. I don't think they're going to pay him beyond this year, and players who the Knicks don't have an interest in paying and to keep for more than a year tend to get traded. Emmanuel Quickley is a good example of that, so I think he could be someone rerouted in this deal. Tyler Kolek is someone I don't dislike, but I do wonder the long-term viability of a guard room of Jalen Brunson, Miles McBride, and Tyler Kolek. Defensively, you're just too flawed in that group. Tyler Kolek is just so limited of a defender. You cannot have him out there with Karl-Anthony Towns. You just can't. It's a disaster. If you add up all those salaries and you maybe took on a guy like KCP back, maybe it lessens the burden of draft picks, because that contract sucks. It's not a great contract, but he's kind of a decent fit for the Knicks. 6'5" guard, pretty reliable three-point shooter. The Knicks could use extra spacing. He's immediately better than anything they had off the bench last year, besides maybe Miles McBride. And you can also argue that might even be a better fit with the five that they have if the spacing doesn't work out. than Hart is. Like, just because he's a better floor spacer. I think that the Knicks could get creative with this deal. A third team can get involved with this deal. I will say, though, I don't want to make this seem like I want Mikal Bridges and or OG Anunoby gone this offseason just to have them gone. I think the path to contending can also include both of them. I don't think the path to contending is removing one of them. I don't even know if the path to contention is trading one of the guys who are in the starting five. The only reason they may have to do so is because of financial reasons. I think that when we look at Jaren Jackson Jr., what we're attracted to is the defense and the shooting. That's because it's very hard to find both in the player, and it's very hard to find both in the player, and then they bring enough size where you get the rim protection you've been looking for. Karl-Anthony Towns is never going to develop in that regard. I just don't believe in it. I don't. That's not a diss on Karl-Anthony Towns. It's not personal to Karl-Anthony Towns, but Dylan, Cat's been in this league for how long now? Like, what? How old were we when he first? Like, I wasn't even in high school yet. What were you in, like sixth, fifth grade?
He debuted in 2015, so I was probably in like 7th or 8th grade.
So it's a decade ago. Yeah. A decade ago. Yeah. I mean, it's been 10 years. We're in year 10 of Karl-Anthony Towns in the NBA. I don't think he's going to develop as a rim protector. But Dylan, if there's other guys that, like, are there other centers out there that or guys like Jaren Jackson Jr. who can technically be a 4 or a 5 for you? Are there other guys you're looking at that are not just Jaren Jackson Jr.? Is he an archetype or just like he's the only guy to go after in that archetype?
There's definitely other players out there that wouldn't cost nearly as much. I mean, I've posted a number of like free agent targets and trade targets on the Fireside Knicks Instagram, so make sure you guys check that out if you haven't already. But there are some big man options out there that they're not like superstars or all-star big men, but I don't think the Knicks need to do that. I think the Knicks, I've made this point already before, and I'll make it again. I do think that they have enough talent to be a championship team. We saw it this year where they were just 2 wins away from an NBA Finals, despite having a head coach who had no idea what he was doing with his roster, right? So imagine you have a head coach that knows what he's doing with his roster, and it's mostly the same roster. I think that team can go far. Matter of fact, I think that team can win a title. You know what I mean? So I don't think they need to necessarily, don't get me wrong, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a good player in his own regard, but I'm also looking at his playoff numbers. He is a playoff dropper. A big-time playoff dropper, actually. In 4 trips to the postseason in his career, he's shooting a career percentage of 39% from the floor, and 33% from 3, a career average points in the playoffs of 15.7. So his playoff numbers historically drop every single time he's been to the playoffs. It happened again this year where he averaged 16 points in the first round against OKC in 4 games, and he shot, I'm checking right now, 37% from the field. 37%. I'm sorry. I don't want another playoff dropper on my team. I don't. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong. I know he's only like 25, 26 years old, so I get it. He has the time to, turn it around and shake off those playoff misfortunes and all that stuff. But he has been in the playoffs a few times. It's not like he had one trip to the playoffs and that was his first taste of it. No. He's been in the playoffs now 4 times. This was his 4th time to the playoffs, and this is the 5th playoff round he's been a part of because he was a part of 2 rounds in his second trip to the postseason, and I think it was 2022, 2023. So, when you look at it that way, do you really want another playoff dropper on your team? That's what I'm concerned about because we saw Cat, who historically has, dropped a little bit in the playoffs. I wouldn't say he's like a, Joel Embiid level playoff dropper, but he's dropped in the playoffs before. He had some good playoff moments this year, and I'll give him credit for that. But, historically, he's never been the best playoff performer. And we kind of saw that a couple times, even in this postseason, where he had some games where he was essentially a disappearing act. He wasn't shooting like any threes whatsoever. And, of course, the defense has been horrible all year. So when you mix the non-offense with the horrible defense, it's terrible, right? So for JJJ's sake here, if he were to be in the playoff setting with us, and then he has really bad games in the postseason where he's not getting rebounds, he's getting into foul trouble, he's not blocking shots, he's not making shots because he historically has not made shots in the postseason, and the Madison Square Garden crowd is booing him off the floor. How do you think they're going to feel about like a big trade for him? You know what I mean? It's a valid concern that I think, and I know the playoffs is not, the entire thing, but I think we all know the goal in mind is to win a championship. I really don't care where they finish in the regular season as long as they qualify for the postseason and can make a deep run into the playoffs. I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, why did they finish as the 3rd seed when they could have been the 2nd seed? No, I don't care. as long as you get into the playoffs and you can make a deep run and you have a good roster, that's really all it takes at this point. The team the Knicks are building is meant for the playoffs, not the regular season. So that's my thing with JJJ. But in terms of like other targets you can look at, you don't even have to go for like all-stars or even like, star level players. You can go for like guys that can play their role well. Like Luke Cornett is a free agent. I know he was formerly a Knick, and I know that some Knicks fans might be like, "Oh, well, we used to hate that guy. We want to run him out of town again." This that. He showed that he has an impact though as a Boston Celtic, as a third string center, where he can come into the game at any point and make an impact. I mean, he had that one game against us in the second round of the playoffs where he had like 7 blocks or something like that. Imagine a rim protector like him who doesn't foul and can get blocks, and it's not even just him. I'm not like making him like a dream target because there's other big men out there. Jakob Poeltl is now on the trade market according to some reports I saw this morning with the Toronto Raptors. Kevon Looney is a free agent. You can go after him as well. There are decent centers that, yes, they're backups. They're not necessarily starters, but if you still have Mitchell Robinson on this team, you can go for a backup. And you can look and see what the center market has to offer in the next summer. Because I'll just be honest right now, the trade markets and the free agent markets outside of like your Kevin Durant's and your Giannis Antetokounmpos is terrible. It's a pretty horrific free agent class this year. I don't even like who's even like the top free agent that's out there. Like Malik Beasley probably is one of them. And you got guys like that. Like it's not exactly like a star-studded free agency class. And to make an additional like major move, the Knicks would have to give up a lot. And I don't know how I would feel about giving up a lot for Jaren Jackson Jr. I think he's a good player in his own regard, but, the foul trouble that I laid out, the playoff dropping, that worries me. And I think it's valid for me to have that.
I agree. And I will say, too, you're just trying to improve your rim protection, and I think that's a very specific skill that you may be able to find in the market. For example, when you mentioned Luke Cornett, I mean, his rim protection and rim deterrence are combining both metrics here. They're near the best in the NBA. Last year, Karl-Anthony Towns was a net negative in terms of rim protection. He actually was he was a rim deterror. Like, he did have some rim deterrence because he's a 7-footer. Like, I get that some guys are just naturally not going to challenge a 7-footer at the rim, but his rim protection was brutally bad. Now, some guys who also grade out very well in terms of rim protection and rim deterrence, who kind of fit your mold of more of a role player type, not necessarily a superstar. Kevon Looney, as you mentioned, is a positive on both sides. Also think it's important to note, Precious Achiuwa was a net negative in terms of rim deterrence while being decent at rim protection. Like, he was okay. But when you are okay at it and there's a high volume of it, of attempts at the rim when you're on the court, that's not great. So you're also trying to upgrade from that. I've mentioned a few times, I kind of floated this out, and Jason Kidd, I don't know if you saw that report, actually isn't off the market entirely for the Knicks, which I find to be kind of insane. Dylan, it's almost like asking a team about a coach is not a bad thing to do. Who could have thought? Wow, I mean,
surely we weren't the ones saying that on here.
No, but again, you have it's just. You got the smartest people on the planet telling you that the Knicks should find a head coach in 2 weeks, because we all know the New York Knicks and their history of quick and brash decisions have always panned out very well for them. Nothing bad has ever happened to the New York Knicks when they decide to make a very what's the word for it? Very brash decision. I still think PJ Washington would kind of help. He's better at rim deterrence than Karl-Anthony Towns is, and he's better at rim protection than Karl-Anthony Towns is, statistically speaking, at least last year. I'm not saying he's a superstar, but I think I would agree with you in the sense that the bar isn't star player. The bar is role player who does very specific things the Knicks need. And P.J. Washington doesn't cost you Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby. And there's an actual, I don't think I'm crazy for saying the Dallas Mavericks may go, yeah, I don't know what we're going to do with this guy. I have no idea what to do with him. None at all. Now, you may have to trade a Josh Hart to do that, but I don't think you're trading 2 first-round picks. I don't think you're trading Mitchell Robinson. I don't think you have to decide on whether Mitchell Robinson has to go or not in a P.J. Washington trade. And if you look at your bench in that scenario, if you have Miles McBride, Mitchell Robinson, maybe you add Landry Shamet back. I loved Landry Shamet. I thought he was really good in the postseason. Small sample size, but don't care. He won me over. Dude, I think you kind of look at that starting 5 and you kind of, not that you're getting the same player as Jaren Jackson Jr., but you're getting a scaled-down version of, hey, we're getting shooting and some rim protection and some size. And the rebounding, you don't feel like you are going down in terms of total rebounds, but you still feel like you can rebound as a team. You move maybe, I don't know who would play better as a shooting guard. I would assume Anunoby would, because I don't think Mikal Bridges handled those matchups particularly well. And I think you and I would agree, Anunoby's the better defender. Like, he just moves better. He's got freakishly long arms. I know Bridges does as well. It kind of creeps me out when I see Mikal Bridges shoot because his arms
Bridges and Anunoby are very
long.
positionless anyway, though, if you really think about it.
Yeah, it's not. We're kind of nitpicking there, but you could. PJ Washington can be your small forward, your power forward. He can play some. He can do the Precious Achiuwa thing where you sometimes run the small ball lineup and have him as the 5. Way better than Precious Achiuwa can. Like, significantly better. This is no discredit to Precious Achiuwa for what he was and for how we got him as just salary filler. He filled his role beautifully. But God, is he not a playoff rotation player? And God, is PJ Washington to step up over that? And without even, like, goes without saying, your spacing and your defense with PJ Washington over Josh Hart is freaking nuts. It's that much better. I think you and I would agree, though, that, like, they have to target rim protection in whoever they get. They cannot bring a guy in who cannot protect the rim or is not going to deter at the basket. Because if they don't bring somebody in who can do that, or if they bring someone who is bad at that, they're going to look a lot more like the Sacramento Kings than they are like an Indiana Pacers or a Boston Celtics or or an Oklahoma City Thunder, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I really have to say, Dylan. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, no, before we do wrap this up, I just wanted to kind of add to your point, because I do agree that they need to add rim protection, because rim protection was brutal last season. I mean, missing Mitchell Robinson for 60 games really didn't help that, but, even aside from that, the rim protection was just never there. Karl-Anthony Towns is not a rim protector. I don't even think he's really a 5 at this point. I think he's better off as a 4. You know what I mean? And it's crazy that I have to say that about a 7-footer, but it's true. We've tried him at the 5 for an entire season, and it went terribly. You know what I mean? So looking ahead to as to who should they get? Yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr. is like the pipe dream. That's like the name, the big all-star, the DPOY, all that stuff. Don't get me wrong. I would not be upset if we traded for him. I want to make that clear, because I know I've sounded very much against a JJJ trade, but I think my concerns are valid enough to where I don't know if I would be like, yes, go get him right now type thing. I feel like I need to, really kind of see it out and really think about all the possibilities about this team going forward, not just for JJJ, but who the head coach is going to be, who some of the other supporting cast will be, if some of these guys are going to stick around, what the roster will look like by the time October rolls around. I think that's really where it comes down for me. And, I will emphasize this point one more time. The Knicks don't need to make another blockbuster. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Blockbusters are cool, right? You and I will sit here and we'll see a blockbuster and be like, oh, wow, we just acquired this all-star. That's awesome. I don't think they need to do it again, though. They made 2 last summer. They made 2 blockbusters last summer to where, I think we can agree they heavily made the team better, right? But I think we're at a point now where depth needs to be the priority. You need to prioritize bench pieces, guys that can back up your starters, guys that can also come in the game and play heavy minutes, guys that can even start once in a while or are good enough to start. You want to get serviceable role players, serviceable depth pieces. You don't necessarily need to go for the home run swing at this point, because you already did that. You've already made the 2 big swings for Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. You've already done that. And you already re-signed OG Anunoby too after you made the home run swing for him, the season before. So at this point, you need to just enhance the depth. And you can do that by looking at some of the targets I had mentioned before, like Luke Cornett, Kevon Looney, Jakob Poeltl as a trade target. Walker Kessler gets thrown around here and there too, but I don't think that's even realistic just because of their asking prices for him. But you get my point. Like, guys like that, you don't necessarily have to go for the big name. Now, JJJ would be interesting, but again, I stand by my concerns with the foul troubles, the playoff dropping, and all that stuff, and the lack of rebounding. They're legit concerns for me, and I think you can agree that they are valid concerns. But I do also see the positive side of it, where he provides the rim protection, he provides floor spacing at the 5, something that the Knicks really would want, especially having both in one player. That would be great for them. But again, he's not like he's like this perfect player. So at the end of the day, we'll just have to see what happens. If you ask me right now what the odds of getting JJJ are, I'm putting it at less than 10%. And I know you're and I know you had said earlier that I'm underestimating the power of Leon Rose, and that's fair. But again, there are many times we get rumored to get like all-star level players, and it doesn't happen. And I know
That's
we've
fair.
had,
That's
and
fair.
I know we've had times where we do get rumored to get them, and we do get them. Such as Karl Anthony Towns, for example. He was rumored to the Knicks for like 2 years, and then we traded for him. So, anything could happen. I trust Leon Rose. I think he makes the right decisions. I also think he's not afraid to be aggressive in the market, which is great. But again, I don't think it's likely. If you ask me right now, again, it's less than 10% chance that I think JJJ will be suiting up in orange and blue come October. But, we are approaching about a half hour on this episode, so I do think this is a good spot to finally wrap the episode up. Let us know what you guys think about Jaren Jackson Jr., though, in the comments section, because he's one of the more interesting topics to talk about right now. The Grizzlies, obviously, as I mentioned in the opening, traded Desmond Bane, so who knows what their future looks like. Maybe JJJ finds his way to the Big Apple. Maybe he does not. Let us know what you think about that, though, because we would love to talk with you guys about that. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and, of course, this YouTube page that you just watched the video on. You can also listen to the audio version of this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening there, make sure you give us a 5-star rating on those. You can follow me and Ryan's personal Twitter accounts. They're right there above our heads. And we will see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out, and let's go Knicks.